Hey gang, so good to be putting this out. Miss everyone. Hope everyone's safe at home. So we're going to carry on our lesson on cycling of nutrients in ecosystems and how humans can affect that. So we left off just looking a little bit about how humans can affect something like the nitrogen cycle. And right now we're going to carry on with some text reading and taking some notes so that we can understand these concepts a little bit more. And I promise I'm going to keep these these lessons a lot quicker, and they'll be on YouTube, so they'll be easily viewed on your devices there. So let's get into it. So human activity systems. We can look at human activities in the same way we look at natural ecosystems. Like an ecosystem, human activities can be divided into three groups. The producers, for example, grow crops and drill for fossil fuels. Consumers consume food and purchase and use other products like furniture, computers, cell phones, Coca-Cola. Finally, the decomposers are places like sewage treatment plants and metal recyclers. Natural ecosystems versus human systems. A natural ecosystem depends on decomposers to recycle all the substances in the system. Organic plant and animal matter is called biodegradable. This means it can be broken down into reusable minerals and nutrients by decomposers, sunlight, and oxygen, and can be recycled through the ecosystem again. So that is really important. This idea of something being biodegradable, this right here, I'm highlighting this definition, is super important. We want to make as many items biodegradable as possible. And the big thing about being biodegradable is when it's done, it needs to be useful for an ecosystem. Now, sunlight can break a lot of things down, but it doesn't necessarily make things useful for ecosystems. And so we're going to talk about some examples of that later. I'm going to get you guys to do a little research project on plastics in the ocean on that. A human activity system does not have efficient decomposers. As well, the goods people make and use are often not biodegradable. Most of our stuff is not biodegradable. Often, consumer goods that people no longer need and waste from industrial activities are dumped and become pollutants. Pollutants are substances that cause harm to the air, soil, water, or organisms in an environment. So I'm going to highlight that as well. There we go. Another important word. In 2008, Environment Canada, and that's part of our government. They're tasked with overseeing everything, making sure pollutants are reduced and keeping a track eye on companies and that. Environment Canada listed 347 substances on their National Pollutant Release Inventory, or the NPRI. The substances include nitrates, phosphorus, toxic acids, cyanide, heavy metals like mercury, and many others. Any company releasing these substances into the environment is required to report it. That's really important. So any company releasing substances into the environment is required to report it to Environment Canada. All right, so they're a government body, and that's really important to know that government takes steps to keep us safe. And here we can see a little diagram here, sort of representing the like the food chain of our consumer system. The only problem is that the decomposers don't necessarily put things back into the environment that we can use. So these decomposers aren't the same as the healthy ones in soil. In reality, of course, human activity systems and natural ecosystems are interconnected. The problem is that Earth's decomposers cannot recycle all the waste that is created by humans. We're just producing too much waste. It probably doesn't help that there's over 7 billion people on the planet. Cycling human-made substances through an ecosystem, biosolids. Many human activities are not sustainable. We talked about sustainability in the last video. Industrial burning of fossil fuels, a lot of farming and forestry, transportation of chemicals. Now, a lot of farming can be sustainable if we use things like small poly farms and things like that to grow lots of different types of foods and keep it small. But really large farms are not sustainable. Large farms and large clear-cut forestry, not sustainable. Sustainable means using methods, systems, and materials that meet our needs today without harming the ability of future generations to meet theirs. That's a really important one. I'm going to use green because green means sustainable to me. There we go. Really important definition. The way humans dispose of biosolids is one example of how unsustainable activities harm the cycling of substances through ecosystems. It is also an example of how people are trying to use sustainable methods to reduce waste. Biosolids are a byproduct of municipal sewage waste treatment systems. They are made by a complex series of chemical processes. During these processes, most of the organic molecules in sewage, that's our poop and our pee and all the stuff that goes down our drain, they will decompose. As well, most pathogens or agents of disease. So pathogens, that's an important word. Agents of disease, so that's bacteria or viruses, in the sewage are killed. Most, but not all. Then water is pressed out of the mixture. What is left are millions of tons of dry organic material. It is rich in nutrients like nitrates and phosphates, which are essential for plant growth. However, biosolids also contain heavy metals and other toxic substances that people flush and dump down the drains every day, like medicine and things like that, cleaners, all that type of stuff. Now, one thing I'm going to highlight is that, yes, nitrates and phosphates are essential for plant growth, but too much of them can be bad. And we talked about that in the last video. So this is a really good just kind of flow chart of this. People dispose of biosolids in different ways. They might be put into landfills where the nutrients cannot cycle through any ecosystem because they are contained in or surrounded by materials that are not biodegradable. They might be burned as fuel, releasing carbon and other chemicals into the air. As well, some biosolids were dumped into oceans, which damaged aquatic ecosystems. So this is some important stuff about biosolids right there. And not so, how they don't work so well. We're going to give this a sad face. On the positive sides, biosolids have also been used to revive eroded soils. For example, the top layers of soils that are mined for metals or minerals become damaged. This process, called strip mining, causes erosion and makes soils too acidic to support plant life. People tried to revive strip mine land in Fulton County, Illinois, in the United States by applying biosolids from Chicago. They hoped it would neutralize the acidic soil. The biosolids returned the soil to a prairie ecosystem and stemmed erosion so that toxic chemicals from the old mine stopped running into the water. This is a good thing. Now, one thing to remember, you can't eat the food of any plants that grow when you put biosolids down, because biosolids still will have toxic metals and they could have pathogens in them. So that's really important. Another way biosolids are now being used is fertilizer for crop soils and compost mixtures. Now this is being used, but you have to be really careful when you do it. People are trying to find ways to recycle biosolids in a sustainable way. Governments are trying to make people feel comfortable with using biosolids as fertilizer for crops in forested areas. It makes sense, but there are a few very important concerns. People worry about pathogens and potentially harmful heavy metals like cadmium, mercury, and lead getting into their food. So if you have to give some examples of metals that aren't good, those are some really important ones. As well, people worry about increased level of nitrogen and phosphorus affecting plant growth and leaching into aquatic ecosystems. So we covered that in the last video. The problem is that not all biosolids are as clean as others. How free of pathogenic and toxic waste biosolids are depends on the sewage treatment system they are processed in. If the treatment of sewage is not done properly, the biosolids are not as useful as fertilizers or compost. And that's really important. We have to really be careful. The only way to really treat biosolids is to cook them. All right, so you have to like burn them. And unfortunately, when you heat them and stuff like that, you can break things down, but then you're going to give off things like carbon dioxide. So it's not perfect by any means. But at least it helps us reduce some of the waste. Careful use of cleaner biosolids. Towns and cities continue to learn better ways to process biosolids. For example, benzene, a toxic substance, used to be present in 93% of biosolid samples in the 1970s. By the late 1980s, only 3% of samples. Biosolids are becoming cleaner. Tests done on biosolids that are properly used show that they can be used safely on crop soils. I would be really careful about that. That's a very blanket statement, so I'm not too happy with that being in the textbook. Towns and states across Canada now sell biosolids for compost and for use on crops. So we are actually going to do a research activity on this and see how cities and towns monitor these types of things. Because you need to know where your food is coming from and how safe it is. And initially this was being done, and it wasn't being done very safely. However, biosolids need to be put on crops carefully. You learned in Chapter 1 that soil testing determines what crop soils need to be fertile. Farmers can then decide how much organic material they need to put on the soil. If they put too much on, plant growth will be affected. Too much can also mean that leftover substances from the biosolids will leach into the groundwater and flow downstream to affect aquatic ecosystems. We need to be careful with the substances we add to ecosystems. Human-made waste can damage producers and consumers in ecosystems. The use of biosolids shows just one example of how people are trying to recycle their waste in a sustainable way. So like I said, we're going to be doing some more activities that dig into this a little deeper and give you a little bit of ammunition so that you can go and see if the city you're living in is dealing with biosolids and how they're dealing with them, and if those biosolids are going to farmers' fields, how you can see if that is safe or not. See you guys later. Check on Edsby for some questions to go with this and the activity that goes with it next.